Welcome to the Amphibian Press podcast. I'm Sara Chats, and with me today is Brianna Da Silva. She's the creator of the Females in Fantasy podcast, product placement right here. And she was nice enough to let me go on her podcast, so now she's nice enough to return the favor. So let's get into it. Tell me a little bit about how you started Females in Fantasy and sort of what your inspiration was for it.
Sure. So I can't remember what the initial inspiration was, but it started off as a Twitter chat. I think one day I was just like, female characters has always been something that I've cared a lot about since I was pretty young. You know, it's always been something that I've noticed kind of the lack of characters that I felt represented by or whatever. And so I decided, let's do like a Twitter chat. And because I've been wanting to do a Twitter chat for a while about this topic and just like have a conversation about it with people online. And I quickly realized that like that one single day of a Twitter chat was nowhere close to being able to cover this topic. I was like, this is a really deep topic. We're like barely getting started. So then I started doing this Twitter chat like every other week or whatever. And then after doing that for about 6 months or so, there was someone I was talking with who gave me the idea to do a podcast. And I was like, okay, I had been interested in wanting to do a podcast for a while. Maybe this could be the perfect topic. And so that's basically what happened. The Twitter chat no longer exists. There was like a time when I was doing both, but now they've like switched over to now where it's just the podcast. But having a lot of fun. I like bringing people on in order to get lots of different perspectives on things too. And that's really interesting to me. I don't like to have everyone always agree with each other too.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the point is, right? Like conversation for sure.
Yes.
So what has been your biggest challenge so far? And your biggest learning experience, maybe we'll phrase it that way.
My biggest learning experience about the topic in general?
That or just podcasting in general, that as a medium. I'm not much of a podcast listener because I'm not auditory. So it's sort of a new realm for me.
Sure. That's a really good question, to be honest. I'm a little bit like unsure because I feel like there have been so many different things that I've learned from this and taken away. I don't know. I guess I could say in terms of challenge, one of the things that that has been like an ongoing kind of question for me is like an ideal interviewing style, like a personal preference, whatever, because there are two different types of podcasting styles that are very popular. One is more conversational, another is more interview, and that's how mine has been. It's been very interview. So it's like very structured. I have these set questions. It's not really about me. It's more about the person I'm bringing on. I don't really ever push back on them or anything. I usually just kind of, I just want them to share their thoughts and experience. And I really like that. But I've also been kind of like more interested in doing a conversational style. So that's always been kind of my, like, how do I like balance and what exactly do I want to find that works specifically for me and for my podcast?
Yeah, that's a huge struggle for me too, because I know, because I have a co-host, so to speak, and her interview style is totally different from mine. Like, she's great at off the cuff stuff, and I can't, I can't do that. And so I always have my questions, and like, I do like it to be casual, but like, yeah, and it's hard to strike that balance and sort of figure out what your listeners want for sure.
Yeah.
So just sort of to switch gears a little bit, tell me a little bit about your writing and how sort of that factors into this whole project, if it does.
Yeah, that's a really good question. How much time do I have to talk about this?
As much time as you want.
So obviously, like as I mentioned before, I guess I didn't really mention that, but I kind of implied it. I've been a writer for much longer than I've been a podcaster. That has been, it's one of those cliches. It's like, I've always been a writer. It's like my earliest memories pretty much that I was really into storytelling. That's just kind of always been who I am. And so let me see what I want to say that's relevant to the podcast itself. I would definitely say that, so I have a novel that I'm currently working on that is, it's coming up to be my debut, my debut book or whatever. So we'll see when it comes out, but it's a big epic fantasy novel. And it's definitely true that I have learned a lot through doing these Twitter chats and this podcast in how I have been developing the story and how I've been creating the characters, which has been really cool. just like being able to think about these kind of things about representation and different question things and kind of interact with things, and just being able to have this topic constantly on my mind has been really cool as a writer, because then it comes and it influences, you know, how I'm answering questions about, you know, how do I want to solve this plot problem or whatever, and or this character growth problem, and so that's really great. I think it's really helped me as a writer to be, because it's really, you know, we talk about representation and stuff, but at the end of the day, all it is it's about good writing. It's about quality craft, I would say, because I think I think good representation is a sign of good writing. And usually when representation is bad, if it's not done in malice, it's usually just done in, like, you know, laziness ignorance or you know, a lack of research, which research is supposed to be a part of the writing process anyway. So or just kind of a thoughtlessness or whatever. And so all that has been helpful. Yeah,
that's great. I mean, it's such a great way to learn, especially as you're the one formulating these questions. They're your own questions, and yes. That's great.
Yeah, before I was oh, sorry.
no, I was just thinking that didn't really occur to me, because ours is more interviewing, like, about people's work, so it's a little bit less heady topics. So.
Yeah. Before I did this podcast, this was like a few years ago, I had a blog that I was running for a while. It was called Storyport. And that had the same kind of effect. It was not about representation. It was just about story, like, you know, like, as there are a gazillion of these types of blogs on the internet, people just writing, like, sharing their own, like, writing advice, whatever. But I found that all, like, was also super, super helpful. Like, I grew so much as a writer just from writing about how to write, because it helps you to, like, think through things that maybe you would otherwise just do on impulse. And then it forces you to, like, oh wait, so why am I doing this, and is this the best way to solve this problem, you know? And so this has just been like another version of that, I would say.
Learning through teaching, almost.
Yeah, exactly. So I recommend doing that if you're for anyone that's, like, any sort of a thing that you're trying to get better at. Sometimes it really helps to just teach someone else in some manner or another.
Yeah. So what about podcasting as a medium do you like the most? I mean, we talked a little bit about, obviously, it's great for learning and it's great for conversation and interviews and stuff, but what personally do you like the most about it?
What personally do I like the most about it? To be honest, it might just be, let me think about this. There are two things that I like. I really like using my voice, which is great, because that's what you tend to do when you're podcasting. So that's a lot of fun for me. And then also I like just kind of the general, like, production process. I'm also a filmmaker, although that isn't really something that is very upfront or that I talk about that much, because I don't have any like films out there or whatever. But my brothers and I, we are filmmakers together. We have a lot of things that we're working on. And so just the general, like, multimedia production and entertainment kind of world is definitely my second passion next to writing novels. So it's just inherently fun for me.
Are you, this is like a random question, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Because I'm, like, super introverted, and I find the whole thing, like, interesting but daunting.
But the whole thing about what?
Podcasting itself, because it is this sort of, like, putting yourself out there. And I mean, once you get there, it's like you and one other person talking, which is fine. But
I am an introvert, but I'm a weird introvert that actually I've always really liked public speaking, and, like, so, like, certain kinds of, I just, like, I have, like, a weird selective certain types of attention I'm extremely uncomfortable with. Other types of attention I'm very natural with. So I just have just the right types that podcasting works. Yeah.
Not that we can, like, break everyone into two different boxes, but, like,
yeah, it's complex. Sure. But yes, I do get, like, every time I do an interview, I do definitely have to, like, go and, like, recharge and stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. So you've tackled some really important topics on your podcast, from, like, the masculine women one with V. Schwab, and one on autistic characters, which was really cool. I love listening to that one. And then obviously our own about disability that you and I talked about. So have you had any backlash about that? I mean, in this current climate.
No, I think sometimes I think there was a little bit of some confusion with a couple. I would say the one with transgender characters, and then also V.E. Schwab's. There were some, like, people on Twitter that were like not understanding really. And I think
Okay.
they didn't listen to the episode. So maybe if they had listened to it, they would understand the nuances. But it's kind of like when people see something where it's like, we need more of this type of character, they might react a little bit and be like, but why? What if I don't want to write that character? It's like, no, you don't have to. No one's telling you have to. It's just like, this is an invitation. It's not all obligatory, so I haven't really had any like real backlash. I think it's just, some kind of like really just some noise on Twitter. It's like, who cares?
which is what else is new. There's always noise on Twitter.
Yeah, the one with the Schwab's episode was pretty funny though, because it ended up being this great big like argument with this one. He might have been a troll, I mean, to be honest, but It was a bunch of Schwab's like fans started like going on and attacking him. So it was like, all right, they got to handle this. This is it's pretty
calling
funny.
the backup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, especially with that particular topic too, because there is that like, well, we want to also show strong feminine characters. It's like, well, we can do both.
Yes, we can do both. That's the point.
Yeah. So if you could interview, this sort of like one of my fun ones. If you could interview anyone, living or dead, any author, who would you choose and why?
I'm gonna sigh because this is one of those that like, I wish she was still alive. I really wish that Ursula K. Le Guin was still alive. I've been reading some of her work lately, and it's just like, I love the way that her work is so like, it's intellectual, really. It's like, it makes you think. And it's also very human and very like, she plays a lot with both world building in terms of like the bigger structures and the way things are working, and then also like the really small daily interactions between people, like friendships and romantic relationships and stuff like that. And so and she does all sorts of different like questions about like gender relationships and sexuality and stuff like that, and I just wish I could have been able to probe her mind a little bit. And so that's like, she passed away like just a couple years ago, I think. It was not long ago. So I'm like barely missed her. I'm like, So anyway, she's like, in my opinion, one of the greatest science fiction writers. So yeah, I wish I could interview her.
That'd be a good one. So it's like confession time. I've only read one of her books, and it was The Wizard of Earthsea. And I started to get into it, and I love the subtlety of her writing, which is, I think, sort of what you were talking about. She just has this way of saying so much without saying really much at all, and I really admired that. But I think I just like wasn't in the headspace to really dive in. But it's like she's been on my list forever. she's her writing style. It's like, I really like the content of her writing, but I kind of don't really like the writing style itself because it's a little bit dry to me. So you have to be in the right kind of a mood to really enjoy it. Although one thing that I might recommend as a way to kind of jump into her stuff is to read some of her short fiction. She has a lot of anthologies with a bunch of short fiction. I read a couple of those recently, and they're like really, they're each one can be a kind of a different tone and whatnot, and she really flexes her creative muscles a lot with those. So I love short stories, so
yeah,
that's good. So what sort of conversations are you hoping to have this season? Because you covered so much. And where would you like to see females in fantasy go? Yeah,
so it's a good question. So I'm like about at the end of season 2, season 3 is about to start up soon. I really want to have more like, and I don't really know how to express this exactly, but just I want to have like a broader collection of voices, I suppose. Because sometimes I feel like there's so much that I wanted to say that I feel like has been covered in seasons 1 and 2, and sometimes I feel a little bit like I'm saying the same things over again. I'm like, I want to be able to explore new topics as well that are related to this, and I'm still a little bit unsure exactly what that looks like, but I don't know, maybe I'll play with the format a little bit too. I'm not sure.
Well, it's so hard to distill like such broad and important topics down to like 20 and 30 minute segments.
Yes.
Like, I mean, it's a good endeavor, but it's so hard. So yeah, I think there does, there is room for like going back and exploring stuff more with different voices too on the same topic, for sure.
Yes, that for sure, because every individual is an individual and has a different perspective. I try not to have like any one topic. I don't want to just have one person talk about it. So there is that too. There are definitely topics that I could cover again with different people. But yeah, I don't know. I just I definitely want to have kind of like a broader base of perspectives, I suppose. And what was the other question? Where do you want it to go?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, sort of the same. It's just different.
Yeah, I would love to use the podcast as a way, and you know, this is the kind of thing that can only be done with a broader audience, but I would love to use it as a way to like build community and to have people be able to have these conversations with each other and not just like listen to me having them with people, you know. So that was what the Twitter chat was definitely for, but I kind of stopped doing it just because it was time consuming. And you really, in order to do a Twitter chat well, you have to really make it consistent and like, because otherwise people forget that it's happening. But I'd love to find more ways to kind of like bring people together to you know, discuss and explore and encourage each other and inspire each other and stuff like that. So I'm still exploring ways to do that, but yeah, I have some ideas. But most of them involve having a slightly bigger audience, though. We'll see.
Yeah, and that's just like, that's time, you know. It's like,
exactly.
Can't rush that.
It's a long game.
So tell me a little bit about Patreon, because I mean, as writers, a lot of us know about Patreon, but you know, when you're doing like big novel length works, it's not the easiest medium to use as far as support goes. So how's that worked for you?
So for Patreon, so it works really well, I think, for things that are like small project oriented things or whatever. Like if you're a YouTuber creating 2 videos a month or something, or if you're or you're a podcaster, you know, little things. It's like or something just that happens on a monthly basis or whatever.
Comics, I think, are a big one for sure.
Yes. Anything where you can be continually producing extra content for your fans that doesn't require a lot of extra effort for you. It works pretty well. So in my case, I've been using it just to kind of like the people that are patrons have like the ability to interact a little bit and to like submit questions, and they can they have a little bit of some choices and stuff about like how the podcast goes. And then also there's some extra content that I do, like, so often have I always do this, actually. I know I said often, but it has like an extra segment or whatever where we'll go into a topic and only the patrons can listen to that. And so that or doing behind the scenes or things like that. And so that's interesting because Patreon is something where people are contributing on a monthly basis or on a project basis. It's good to be able to have something that doesn't drain the creator, you know, isn't like a lot of extra like mental creative effort that's going there, but it is a really big payoff like for the patrons themselves.
Yeah, I've dabbled in it, and I think I love the idea of Patreon, and I think it's fantastic that we have that, even with its ups and downs that it's had in the past few years. But yeah, it's one of those mediums where it's like, unless if you really have it nailed down and have that like backlog where you're doing like short story anthologies, as far as like actual writing, you know, book stuff goes, it's like, I wish there was a hybrid somehow that we could figure out.
Yeah, maybe.
So tell me, if you don't mind, just speaking of writing books, a little bit about what your novel is, and sort of what you're looking at with that.
Sure. So it's called City of Reckoning, and it is the short elevator pitch for it or whatever is that it's about a group of teenagers that get caught up in a war and begin to wonder if they're fighting for the wrong side. And that's kind of an oversimplification, but it gets the pitch right. But yeah, it's you know, it's a story about empire and about rebellion and about adventure and going out into the unknown and friendship and family, things like that. And so I've been working on the story. I don't know, for a long time, but I've been working on the actual manuscript for about like 4 years now, and it's in its 4th draft. So I'm currently doing that. Like what I would say is probably the last major story rewrite. So that's exciting. I'm going to be going into the more minor edits after that. So it's always been this thing where I keep like putting like a release date on it, and then it keeps getting pushed back because I am self-publishing this one because it's just, this is like, it's my fantasy world that I really want to have a lot of control over or whatever. And I'm also really, really, really a big fan of marketing. So it's a lot of, I really, really want to do marketing. So I'm like a perfect fit for self-publishing. But yeah, I kind of want to be, my long-term goal would be to be a hybrid author. I would love to do traditional publishing as well at some point, just not with this current series.
Yeah.
Have control over this one. Yeah.
Well, especially when it's like, when it's your baby. And I mean, as awesome as traditional publishing has gotten in the past few years with marginalized characters, you know, there's a long way to go. And, you know, I think they're looking for very specific people to tell those stories. And that doesn't always lend itself well to every story. So, yeah, I mean, we do self-publishing. I can't speak for that because I'm not in that industry. Yeah.
I both are great. Both are great.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is they both have
their
such benefits, and so
yes.
Where can people find you and find your podcast? Online, and I mean, not in person. Don't go knock on her door. But
that would be creepy.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I'm pretty active on Twitter. I'm trying to be less so. I find it to be kind of a toxic site. But anyway, if you want to find me there, I'm Brianna _Da Silva. So it's BRIANNA _DASILVA. And then I also have a blog, briannadasilva.blog. And that's kind of like a hodgepodge of different stuff. So like I'll talk about storytelling, craft, and stuff like that. And then also so I had like a story that I'm still trying to write about right there about my my journey out of evangelicalism and discovering that I was bi and stuff like that. So that's there. And then also for the podcast, Females in Fantasy, that is on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and on YouTube.
Awesome.
And it's also on Twitter.
And if you aren't already, you should go be a patron on Patreon.
Oh yes, there's patreon.com.
Awesome content there.
You sound like you're speaking from experience.
Right,
so
yeah.
That's interesting.
Almost like I've read it. and
almost.
So definitely go check her out, and just there's so much stuff there to explore that it's like a wealth of knowledge. So
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and definitely, let us know as stuff progresses, and I'm really curious to hear where your writing goes and where the podcast goes. So, well, you'll be hearing from us again, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for having me on.
All right. And this has been the Amphibian Press Podcast, and I'm Sara Boris, and with me today is podcaster and writer Brianna Da Silva. Thank you.